Good evening. It is Monday, February 2nd. This is the Guilford Board of Education. I am calling this special meeting to order. Tonight's special meeting is for the purpose of discussing the proposed budget that's been put before us by the Guilford Public Schools Administration and by our superintendent, Dr. Freeman. You'll note on the agenda that the item is to discuss for possible action. We do have the option of voting on a final budget tonight. I highly suspect that that is not going to happen simply because we are really considering a lot of different aspects of the budget as we deal with a particularly high proportional increase. Not unlike many other school districts across the state of Connecticut this year. So if we do not reach a vote or even hold a vote tonight, we will be meeting next Monday, February 9th, a regular Board of Ed meeting, and can delay the vote until that time. In addition, we did discuss at our meeting last Thursday the possibility that we might consider an additional special meeting if we feel like by the end of this discussion we need that, and so we will consider that later this evening. This is a meeting in which we, the board, will be talking with each other, talking with Dr. Freeman, Dr. Goss, Mr. Hamill, Mrs. Trudeau, as we work through this budget. There is not a public forum part of this meeting, but as always, we welcome comments, input from the public. Please go to Guilford Public Schools website. Each board member's email address is there. And so I really am just then going to open up the meeting. I do want to note that at the end of our meeting last Thursday, Dr. Freeman, you told us that you would be coming with some items for discussion. We typically, as a board, look to the administration when we're making difficult budget decisions for areas that they might recommend. It's very clear from Dr. Freeman's comments last week that what we're going to talk about and what he might be bringing for discussion are not all recommendations, and many of them, in fact, may not be recommendations. But as we look at a budget that right now is at 7.13%, we're in a position where we feel like we really need to discuss all types of options, both to give us considerations for possible reductions or to make clear what a reduction could mean if it were taken in any given area, because I think we all have concerns about making reductions that would really impact the school in a way that we would not want to support. So before I turn to Dr. Freeman, does anyone have kind of a pressing question or comment?
Nope.
All right. I do also want to note that our colleague Jen Scoggin could not be here tonight. Really wishes she could be. This was something she simply couldn't avoid, another commitment. She will be joining us as we continue in future meetings, but it was important to her that I mentioned that, and I told her I certainly would. We have valued her input already in the short time that she's been on the board, and will continue to want to hear her input. All right, Dr. Freeman, I'm going to turn it over to you to start discussions.
Thank you, Dr. Balistraci, and I just want to start by, and I apologize, but repeating something that you just said.
Absolutely
so
fine.
I'm passing out a worksheet for us to use for purpose of discussion. This worksheet has a total dollar value of $1.5 million. These are items that I believe we should be discussing and should be discussing publicly, recognizing the size of the budget as it sits, and discussing possibilities for reduction. Many of these I put on the list unenthusiastically, and I am certainly not recommending that we should be making a reduction of $1.5 million to the budget at this time. The size of the list is to give you, the board, some room to move in the decisions that you make. And Dr. Balistraci, I'm happy to go down item by item and just explain what we're looking at and why these items would be on my list for discussion and what the associated dollar value is and why.
Okay, and I predict that many of us will have comments or questions on a host of these items. So unless you have a problem with that, suggesting we entertain those discussions as we go through? Okay.
Yep, we could either get a brief overview and do questions at the end, but you know how...
What would people prefer?
You know that I don't do well with brief, so it might make sense to...
Okay.
I think we should go through them.
Maybe go through them.
I think we should.
Okay.
Sure. So the first line here is an adjustment that we suggest making based on the latest information that we have received from the State Department relative to excess cost projections. So you know every year that special education costs that exceed 4.5 times the usual per student expenditure qualify for excess cost reimbursement from the state. The state has never been able to cover 100% of those costs. Most years, the reimbursement has fallen in the low 70 to high 60% of the costs that should be covered. In the budget as we initially built it, we had built projecting a 59% reimbursement based on the most recent information we were receiving from the state. We believe that with the latest information we have, that we could budget for a 63% reimbursement for excess cost. We believe that is still relatively conservative. It's clearly not as conservative as 59%, but the information from the last year and most recently bears out that that should cover. That would be a reduction to this budget of $77,850. I believe that that recommendation is solid as it stands. It's going to get more complicated as I layer other recommendations. And so some recommendations might begin to stack up on individual budget lines, but we believe that that is a solid recommendation based on projections from the State Department. Remember, we used to budget at 73% anticipated reimbursement from the state. So 63% is still a relatively conservative number.
But so sorry,
Yep.
but have seen lower numbers over the last few years. So there's a reason we've been more careful. Right. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
Anytime we move off a more conservative position to a slightly less conservative position, we are inviting liability into the budget. And we know that in other years where we have early in the school year been able to project that we would go over in the tuition line, that meant we have had to make compromises in other lines, freezing discretionary building level budgets, withholding substitute coverage, making decisions of that nature. But again, as a standalone recommendation, we are confident making that recommendation.
Okay. Did you have a question about that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that, right? This is on top of a projected decrease in tuition already.
Correct.
Right? So.
And I need you to put a pin in it for a minute because we're going to talk more. So tuition is already projected to go down by, is it 487,000 or 482,000? It's going to go down by an additional 77,000 when we should we choose to make this reduction. Probably should have clustered these differently, but I'm going to take a slight detour and I'm going to talk a little bit about regular transportation. This is a conversation, Mr. Delaventura, that you started last time we met. We have looked more carefully at the scheduling for tech and VOAG schools. We believe that by changing from full buses to vans that we can make a reduction to the regular ed transportation across the school year that could result in a reduction of 75,000. Now that's an area that's going up significantly. We believe we can reduce that increase by $75,000 in regular transportation.
And that's just by downsizing the actual bus itself. Has nothing to do with either consolidating with other districts or that's just strictly the easiest solution that we're looking at right now, but doesn't prevent us from down the road seeing if we could find other ways to save on.
If we can partner with somebody else or get even more creative, we may be able to generate more savings, but we're not confident suggesting those at this time.
Okay.
But this 75,000, we are confident suggesting, even if we needed to maintain 2 vans on our own, we could still net this reduction.
Okay.
Coming back to tuition, there is another tuition reduction that shows here for $100,000. Now, again, this has involved going back, sitting with Mr. Scanziano again, looking at the budget as we've built it, looking at the contingencies that we've built into that budget, and sort of specifically looking at a specific program that we created some years ago in partnership with Madison and Clinton and Learn. The Strive program was an 18 to 21 at that time transitional program that we were creating. We did it collaboratively with those 3 other towns and with Learn. It kept us from sending students to more expensive placements in New Haven and kept those students closer to home. We're looking at our partnership in the Strive Collaborative more carefully now that we're sending more of our students to the wholly local Guilford Transition Academy. So we believe that by looking at that carefully and looking at the overall contingency, that we could further reduce the tuition line by an additional $100,000 and reduce special transportation by an associated $30,000. That means that we're recommending tonight reducing the tuition line by a further $177,850. So again, combining those 2 numbers means we're buying a slightly greater liability, but again, we're confident bringing those numbers to you tonight, and those numbers don't involve reducing staffing. They don't involve reducing services to students. We believe that we can do those by looking at the current budget lines. It gets more complicated as we continue to go down the page, but I wanted to highlight those.
So can I just ask?
Of course.
So how many, I mean, I don't know if you could tell me how many students we have in the Strive program. I don't know if you could say that, but.
Yeah, so we were carrying around 5 or 6, and at this time it has dwindled to only a very small number of placements. And so we don't want to completely pull out of the collaborative, but we think that we can reduce our investment to the collaborative, and that does involve looking a little bit carefully.
So just to clarify, you're not paying per student, you're doing a lump sum to them currently? Like, how does that work? I guess is my question.
We were doing it as a town partnership. We're looking at restructuring our involvement to a per student enrollment, and so that would allow us to generate the savings.
So sometimes we made the benefit by having more students but paid less, and now we've got less students who are paying more.
And it's less likely having the Transition Academy in town that we will end up getting more students than an individual cost would end up resulting for us. But it's been a really good program. We're really proud of the work we did, so we don't want to pull out completely. And again, even if those don't necessarily work out, we believe that looking more carefully at the contingencies we've built into this year, that we could make the $177,000 reduction.
And does the Transition Academy have capacity to accommodate the students who might move from Strive to the Transition Academy?
No. So the transition has sort of happened naturally. What's happened is we didn't bring students back from Strive and place them, but now as other students age up, we've got 2 options. And so because we have a wholly local option, we're just placing fewer at Strive every year. For some students, Strive remains a good and a better placement. We just think that by changing from owning a third of it to simply buying individual seats would be a better relationship for us with Strive moving forward. The board remembers that we've been looking at larger spaces and we haven't been able to find a larger location to accommodate the Transition Academy. And I think long term, we want to maintain different placements for our students 18 to 21. We're never going to have a one-size-fits-all for that population. And so I think maintaining that relationship with Strive is important.
On the tuition page, just looking at our approved 25-26 is $88,000. That has to do with our pre-K tuition and our open choice lines. We're calling for a further reduction down to $149,000. Is that due to the raise in cost for our pre-K on top of anticipated open choice? just trying to understand that fourth line on the tuition sheet.
Yeah, Linda, can you?
Give us a page number. Yeah.
Page
79.
It's that last line.
Yes, it's budgeting for a little few more open choice students and for the
The rise in pre-K.
rise in pre-K, especially with the change of the program structure.
Okay.
It's mostly the pre-K revenue.
So that's a pretty healthy bet.
Yeah, we've gone to only full-day placements.
Yeah.
We've had an increase in tuition there, and we offered about double the choice seats compared to what we had offered this current year.
I want to add, I mean, so these numbers are obviously starting to help, right? I guess the question that I would ask is, knowing where we've historically been over budget, or I'm sorry, under budget with tuition over the last at least 3 years or so, do we feel like there's more to take here, or is this as conservative as we want to be, given the cost, given the rise in excess cost grant, given savings where we've seen it? Is this where we're comfortable, or is this another line that we might go back to?
This would be a line that I would only want to go back to if pressure became significant. And so again, as we talk about trying to make whatever reduction we need to make spread across a surface, I would not want to go further in this line as you, the Board of Ed, is deliberating a reduction for this line. If, however, and these are always opportunities, if there was a motion from the floor at town meeting to establish a zero budget increase for the schools that were to pass, that motion has been made in the past and it didn't pass. Or if the Board of Finance were to make a significant cut, then this might be something that, yes, we would go back and revisit. But I worry, right? Every time we make a reduction to tuition, it makes me a little bit nervous about what's around the corner that we're not seeing right now.
Other questions? So we are not making
No, I
decisions.
just thought
So
we would talk about each one.
I'm just summarizing. These sound like areas that have rationale behind them in terms of a further reduction. And so noting that they total 282,850, which is not a small
Not a small number. And again, I'll just note, there are going to be several items on this list that I will suggest we can take out of budget numbers. But if these needs arise, these are needs that we will have to meet. And so that when I talk about assuming a liability in the
Right.
budget, that's what I'm talking about. But we feel confident that while they're slightly less conservative, they are reasonable and responsible budget numbers in those areas. The next item on the list is simply to expand an exercise that we have already explained. I've already mentioned that Principal Chaff is looking at sections at the high school and had already been planning on reducing one FTE at the high school. That would not be one single full-time teaching position. It would likely be an offering in one department, two offerings in a different department, an offering here or an offering there that would total to one FTE. I am suggesting with this that reduction goes to 2 FTE reductions at the high school. I have met with Principal Chaff since our last meeting. We have looked at some early projections. We do think that we can reduce more sections. It will spread across more subject areas. It will have the effect, it will begin to have an effect that one of our public commented on at the last meeting. We know that we can make these reductions based on some class sizes and enrollment requests. The more tightly that we budget sections at the high school to be at the middle or upper end of class size projections or expectations, it means the less flexibility that we may have built into that schedule. But as our enrollment has dipped below 1,000 for the last 2 years, it becomes difficult to offer every class that every student wants that can fit in every possible iteration of a schedule. It wasn't too many years ago that a parent came to comment that that their child was not able to get all 4 of the specific AP classes that that child really wanted to have on her resume before applying to college, because some of them fell into periods that became mutually exclusive. So we know we can make those reductions. We know that we can manage it with the staffing decrease and stay within reasonable class sizes. It's just a note that it will begin to constrict the flexibility that falls into the schedule. 2 AP history courses where we only anticipating enrolling 10 students in each section helps students fit it into their schedule. 1 AP history class that meets at a specific time where we expect to enroll 22 students doesn't necessarily meet what everybody else wants to see in their schedule. And it's just the reality of a high school that begins to drop down into the hundreds rather than slightly above 1,000 with the staffing. But again, recognizing that challenge, it's a recommendation that we believe we're prepared to put forward, and Principal Chaff understands that it's going from 1 to 2 FTE reductions.
And that doesn't mean we're going to take a current teacher and reduce a current teacher's position. We're just going to take some time out across the board. So in other words, no one's losing their job in this case?
No one will likely lose a full job in this case, but it is likely that the least senior member of some of those teaching departments may see their assignment go from full-time to 80% or 60%. And those reductions, if they cannot be absorbed through attrition, ideally what we would like to see is that if the I'm just going to pick one at random, but if the social studies department were decreasing by 0.4 FTEs, ideally we would hope to recognize a retirement or somebody relocates, and then we advertise for a 0.6 position. If that doesn't happen, then the least senior member of the staff in that certification area would be told that their teaching assignment is dropping from 100% to 80% or 60%. There is a recall list. Any teacher who experiences a reduction in force, partially or completely, is held on a recall list for 2 years. And if we were to grow that department back a year from now, they would have the right of first refusal on going back to that full-time assignment should that happen. As we go through this conversation with a number of the K-6 certifications that we've already discussed, if we cannot absorb all of those through attrition, we'll be going through a similar process in those. It's likely that this budget, and I'll remind the board again, it was 4 or 5 years ago that we reduced 6 English language arts teaching positions from Adams in 1 year. We restructured from 5-person teams to 4-person teams. It was a reduction in 6 teaching positions, all in 1 year. We did not absorb all of those with attrition. We didn't have 6 retirements in the English department that year. So there were people who were reduced, and they were placed on the recall list. The next line is...
Can I ask a question on that
of course.
topic first? So if a teacher is reduced from full-time to 80 or 60, and he or she decides not to stay in district, then we have to advertise for a 60 or 80% position. How often do those get filled?
Always. We have not, well, almost always, unless they are in a really particularly challenging subject area. And some of the most challenging subject areas currently are going to be world languages, special education, and science. In Guilford, we have almost always been able to fill even the part-time assignments in those other areas. The reality is that if we don't have an opportunity to move from part-time to full-time, those employees are often more transient. They don't stay as long in a 60 or 80% assignment in Guilford. If something opened up that was full-time in Madison or Branford, they will likely move on to a full-time position.
Thanks.
The next line is similar, and I note that I come to this one hesitantly, but I recognize that if I'm talking about spreading reductions out across multiple areas, we cannot just be looking at classroom assignments and not also talking about some of the instructional coach and specialist assignments. We currently have 14 instructional coaching and specialist assignments. I'm suggesting that in this budget, we could reduce 1 or 2 of those positions. We will redeploy the resources that we hold on to. I'll remind the board that it was probably 16 years ago that we began bringing coaches into the district, and we hired 3 in our first year. So 16 or 17 years ago, we hired 3 instructional coaches. We have added 1 or 2 a year over those intervening 16 years and built up, not every year, but most, and built up to a cohort of 14. I do want to note that I think 1 or 2 is a reasonable reduction, and I believe it's a reduction that we could recover from relatively quickly in better budget times. But I think we need to look at those areas as well. And Dr. Goss will look at how those resources are deployed, and we will look at how that will be managed. I want to note the salary cost associated with that. So again, I want to remind the board that many or most of our coaches have come to us with significant experience and are relatively senior. Very few of our coaches are working at a first-year teaching salary or only have 1 or 2 years experience in the district. So a coaching reduction will likely result in a coach or a specialist who might move into a classroom position, and then because of those contract vehicles, it will very likely be a much more junior staff member who is reduced, who is placed on that recall list. So you won't save a top step salary. The budget number that you see represented is a first step teacher target and the addition of the stipend that coaches draw additionally. So that is the number that you see represented at 78,000. Again, it suggests 1 or 2. But I also don't think that we're done. And so my recommendation, again, might be to make a reduction of 1. And then if we need to make further reductions, there's an opportunity to extend to 2 if necessary. It goes closely together, but underneath that, we have now built up the interventionist cohort to be 8 interventionist positions in the school district. 2 were just added last year. I am suggesting that we reduce the interventionist number by 2, going back to 6. It doesn't need to be the 2 that were added. I again would suggest that Dr. Goss, meeting with the elementary and the Baldwin principals, will make a determination about how to deploy the remaining intervention resources if we make a reduction of 2. And the same logic applies. While our interventionists are generally teachers at the very top step, especially those 2 hires from last year, they were our own teachers who came out of classrooms to take the interventionist positions. Those teachers could slide back into classrooms, and it would be a reduction in force at the lower end of the salary scale that we would be absorbing there.
My concern with that one is that's something that we heard from both teachers and parents as absolutely a necessity. So in my opinion, I think that should be a last resort, but because so many people have advocated for that, and what we're seeing with the kids now, there's such a need for it, and that's what everybody's been begging for. So
I absolutely understand that, and I will continue to, as we go through the conversation, to remind everybody, particularly the watching public, that every teacher in the school system is also an interventionist. It is not their full-time assignment, but every classroom teacher, every teacher works with our neediest students. The coaching model has the multiplier effect. The coaches help every teacher in the classroom to be a better interventionist. And so, again, this is one of those moments where I don't relish either of these lines. We just started really growing that interventionist position last year. I hate adding something one year and removing it the next year, but as I think about the impact on Tier 1 instruction broadly, that impacts every student in every school, and as I think about the impact because coaches work through teachers, and again, it would be I think, easier and quicker to rebuild the interventionist numbers than to rebuild the coaching numbers. I'd rather see 2 and 2 than see 4 coaches. It will be much harder and take longer to rebuild 4 coaching positions than a 2 and 2 model. And so I just want you to understand the rationale for what we're putting forward.
One last question about that. The interventionists, though, do not have a stipend, is that correct?
They do not.
Okay.
Interventionists work for a straight teaching salary. There's no stipend attached to those positions. And again, right, interventionists work directly with students, and it may be as few as a dozen or 20 students that they're working with. A coach can impact the experience of every student in the school because they work with every teacher in the school.
Dr. Freeman, what is specialist? When you say instructional coach slash specialist, what's your specialist?
Over the past several years, we have had a math curriculum specialist that was part of the coaching cohort. We have most recently had 2 technology integration specialist positions, particularly over the pandemic years. Those positions were really important. At this point, we are carrying 13 instructional coaches and 1 technology integration specialist, but I just didn't want to not label that. I wanted to be clear. What we have done in the last few years is we have taken those specialist titles and turned them into school-based coaching positions so they're not connected to central office. But we reduced the specialist numbers. There was about 3 specialist positions. We brought it down to 1 because we wanted to increase. It's how we got to a math coach at every elementary school. I think 1 was an added FTE, but to some degree it was by relabeling a specialist position to a building-based coaching position. Did I get that right?
You did.
Okay.
In fact, our technology integration specialist, part of what we've asked her to do this year is to serve as a science coach at Adams, because that was an area that we wanted to target this year, and she happens to have some content expertise there. So she's also partially a science instructional coach.
She meets with the coaches. She's essentially part of that cohort, but because she carries a different title, I just wanted to be really clear and get it on the piece of paper.
So at an elementary school, if we've got one teacher who is teaching 2nd grade, she's teaching English and she's teaching math, but this particular teacher has 2 coaches, a math coach and an English language coach, is there a role of one singular coach, like at the elementary level, where you're not necessarily specializing a teacher, like the teacher is obligated to teach both subjects? Is there a coaching position where they would wind up teaching both? Like, are they trying to teach them to just be a better teacher in all subjects, or is it a requirement that it's specialized per subject matter?
No, it's not a requirement. It's a different model. So when we began building out the coaches were coming in and they were very specifically literacy coaches. They may have had expertise in literacy instruction. We were bringing them in for that reason, and they were working with all teachers, but they were targeting the part of the day when the teachers are teaching literacy. We've expanded to have one who specializes in literacy, one who specializes in mathematics instruction. And I know you're tired of the sports analogies, but it would be as if you were a baseball player and you had both a fielding coach and a batting coach. So you have different parts of your game, and you have 2 people to help you improve that game. If you're a new teacher, you might really be spending equal amounts of time with the literacy coach and the math coach. If you're a more experienced teacher who really has the math game down, but you're working to improve your reading instruction, you might just be spending a large amount of time with the literacy coach and a lot less with the math coach. You could say we want to go back to one coach at each elementary school and make them a generalist instructional coach who doesn't lean into one of those areas of specialization. But based on the analogy, right, that works, but there's a certain weakness to that. To have somebody there who's really good at math instruction helping the teachers, and somebody else there who's really, really expert at reading instruction, not every teacher is everything, so it's a way to specialize. And again, it was a model that took us 15 years to grow out. Yes, we could reduce it. We could reduce it differently. We don't just have to go back and say we only coach in literacy. We could go back and say it's down to 1 per building, but they coach in instruction. It's just different, right? Content, and you think about it as you get to the high school, and the high school teachers specialize in those areas. You could have everybody teaches and everybody learns pedagogy, but it's different for a science teacher than it is for a literature teacher. An elementary teacher is asked to be able to do both.
Go ahead.
No.
Jen, Jen Scoggin could not be here tonight, but had some questions about coaching that I suggested I would at least ask on her behalf, and here we are in the conversation. So can you tell us more about the impact coaching has had on Tier 1 instruction at all levels, elementary, middle, and high school? And if you wouldn't mind for viewers who don't know what Tier 1 is.
Yes. So Tier 1 is standard classroom instruction. It's the instruction that all children should have access to every day. What is actually really important, kind of connects the two questions, is thinking about what we're asking teachers to do and the amount of time that they're spending. We know that we have to create a system that supports coaching in order for it to be effective. And so for a long time, we made coaching voluntary and we said opt in if you want to, and we just discovered we weren't getting the results that we wanted. So we tightened the model. We made sure that all teachers had access to coaching, and that then we were requiring that they participate in coaching through our new Ed Growth Plan. And we also required coaches to spend time in classrooms every single day. They're in each of the classrooms that they're with the teachers that they're working with on a weekly basis. So while we could go to an instructional coach, and certainly a model we have considered, the reality of that would be that it would chip away at that system that's actually showing us the results that we've been looking for, because part of it is that every coach is in the classroom with the teacher, co-teaching and modeling and meeting the kids and seeing what's going on with those kids. They would lose the opportunity to have the time to be in those classrooms the way that they are. And we found that that's a real lever for change for us. So it's certainly, I understand the position that you're in, and I am passionate about this, so I think I get carried away about it sometimes. I do understand that you have to make cuts and they have to come from somewhere. So please know that I understand that, and I don't relish your position for you. But also, it is vital that we think about what makes coaching work, and we don't undermine what makes it work. When I think about Tier 1 instruction, it's that standard instruction that all children should have. It is also sort of the basic health of the system. If you have a healthy Tier 1, you have a healthy school system. And what our coaches do is they are a fundamental part of that. A little bit of background on what happens across the country, things that I didn't know until we were at Learning Forward in December. We learned by sitting at lunch one day and talking to people from Missouri and Tennessee and Seattle and having these conversations with people from all over the country, that it's pretty much standard and expected that you will have a coach at every grade level or on every content area team in other places in this country, and places that I had considered maybe not as instructionally strong as I think of Connecticut being. And then I started to pull books off my shelf today and thinking about the research behind coaching, and realized that every book that I have that's been published in the last 10 years assumes instructional coaching is available to every single teacher all the time. When they're talking about the models and the systems and the settings, they are assuming that there is a professional developer working side by side with every teacher in every classroom. That's all of the research from the last decade is showing. So it's really important to think about what we consider necessary for Tier 1 instruction. And when we start to think about how Connecticut has lost ground in the last decade or 15 years, I start to wonder if we're not keeping pace with the rest of the country. And that concerns me. That's certainly not Guilford specific. Part of why I came to Guilford was because of the strong coaching model here, because I believe it is essential. When I think about Tier 1 instruction, I think about keeping yourself healthy. When you keep yourself healthy, you think about how you're sleeping, how you're eating, how you're exercising. If you are to take away any of those components, you can do other things in that Tier 2, which is that second layer of support. You could take medicines, you could use caffeine to keep you awake instead of sleeping properly. None of those things are actually keeping you healthy. They're masking the problems that you have. And so when we take things out of tier one, like coaching, like teachers, and we mask the support that we're giving to kids by adding tier two, by adding tier three, all of those supports certainly do directly help children, but they don't grow our system. They don't make us better at tier one. They don't ensure that every child has access in the way that we believe that they should in Guilford. So I really want us to think about coaches as part of the health of our system at tier one, making all teachers better so that we don't need to keep layering on these supports that are really just Band-Aids for a broken tier one system.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Other questions at this moment on this topic? I'm sure we'll have more.
Yeah, and we've
Okay.
got more areas to go to.
Yeah.
Dr. Freeman, I do have
Yep.
one question. You had mentioned, and it might have just been, so you had mentioned that you would rather have us do something like 1 or 2 coaches, 1 or 2 interventionists, rather than 4 and 0. Have you taken any out yet? I
No.
can't remember. Okay.
No, so the budget as it stands in front of you at the 7.13, I have made classroom reductions that keep us within the board recommended class sizes. I didn't go further in any of the other areas because wanted to be able to have this level of conversation
Thank
before
you.
making any changes to supports or programming of that nature. And so again, that includes 15 years of building up to 14 coaching positions and just recently building up to a level of 8 interventionists. And so I'm suggesting a possible reduction of 2 in each of those areas.
Okay, thank you.
We have also looked and we have identified 4.5 custodial and maintenance positions. We now have a second shift part-time maintenance position that gets some work done in the schools after hours, and there are 3 part-time custodial positions. We are prepared to reduce we could reduce 1.5, we could reduce 0.5, 1.0, up to 2.0 custodial positions. Again, we've worked really hard to build up to the level that we're at. We would want to rebound from this at some point, but we believe that that is a reasonable reduction. We talked about a reduction of this nature last year when we looked at paraprofessionals. We cut 5 paraprofessional positions from the budget last year. At your last meeting, I told you that we had to add those positions back into the budget because they were needed this year. I will note that while we've added them back into the budget, we haven't filled all of our para positions at this time. So while we are up to essentially the number that we were at last year rather than the lower number this year, we continue to have rolling vacancies in para positions. We do believe that if we can stabilize our hiring, that we could again reduce 5 instructional para positions from next year's budget. And if we were able to fill those reliably, we'd be in a good spot. I will again note that if the needs arise, we will fill them regardless of whether or not they're in the budget. So this becomes a budget line. It's again one of those liabilities, but we believe we can make that reduction.
I'm sorry, just note in that consideration, not only did you need to hire 5, but I feel like I've heard you mention over the last couple of years that we have had trouble with
Yes.
open positions. So I can't predict either way, and I appreciate the optimism, but we have struggled for a number of years filling the positions that we have identified as needs in the paraprofessional category.
Right, and even in
Okay.
this current year, even though that we will identify that the staffing model has gone up, again, we've replaced the 5 that we cut in the staffing model. It is likely that we will not expend all of those salaries because of these rolling vacancies and the delays that we have in filling those vacancies. We do believe that particularly at the elementary level, that with more work on the schedule and with more thoughtful clustering of students, that we will be able to function at a lower number of paraprofessionals. And again, we need some of the managerial time to be able to do that planning and to do that work, but we do believe that that's a reasonable reduction. There are additional paraprofessional positions that I want to note. There are 4 non-instructional para positions. Those are essentially some library para positions at the lower levels, and a para that is associated with the band instruction at Baldwin that helps with setup and instrument maintenance. These are positions that we think that we could reduce. They're not working directly. The library positions more so than the band position. They're not working directly with the students. We believe that we might be able to work with, for instance, parent volunteers to help at the libraries, especially at the elementary levels, with taking returns, reshelving books, and doing some of the work that we currently have paraprofessionals doing in those settings. So we believe that's a reduction that can be made. We worked over the last several years to try to build up to bringing 1 technician. This is a technology, basically a hardware support person. We have 1 at each building so that there's always somebody on site to help a teacher who runs into a problem. Now, there's 1 at the high school for nearly 1,000 students, and there's 1 at each elementary school. We're suggesting that we reduce at least 1 position and that we start looking more at a service ticket model, and so that we would be moving the people around and they'd be dispatched out of central office. But again, this is a place where we think we can make at least 1 reduction in that area.
What are the hours of that position? I see it at, I see the number associated with it.
Are those full-time positions, Linda?
Yes.
The full-time?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're school year positions only. They work regular school hours, Kevin?
Only because it seems low.
Yeah, it does seem very low.
I just bring it up. Is this an area where, we have, IT students that want, to be able to learn some of these things that are getting done within the, Kevin's office, that we could have, hands-on based courses to do some of the things we're doing. I'd imagine we're doing a lot of Chromebook cleanup. I'd imagine we're doing, a lot of things that Kevin doesn't have time for.
Yes, but a lot of it is sort of a need in the moment. And so a teacher experiences a problem, and we need somebody who can scramble into that classroom and help them in real time. And so even going to the work ticket model will slow that response time down. But to try to do a student club that only meets after hours, it wouldn't have that on-the-ground component that the principals and the teachers need to be able to rely upon.
I would imagine sometimes you'd have maybe some confidentiality,
Yes, sure,
or if they come across something they're not
Yes.
supposed to and put them in a weird position, it'd be tough.
That was going to be the second point, yes.
Big one.
So I'm on page 44, which has this information system salaries. I did have a kind of a follow-up question to John's, which is not to ask the same question again, but we have the 9 technicians at 517.
We can check the number for sure.
Number doesn't add up.
There's something about the number that doesn't add up unless it's a varied array of positions within that 9.
It
is.
There's a varying array.
Okay.
And more experienced people who've been here for a longer time versus a newly hired, lower level entry person.
Okay, so we should assume a variation in range of pay within that. Okay.
Yes.
Well, and again,
So it leaves us with 8 technicians.
Well, there's 9 positions, only 9 schools. Some of those people have district-wide responsibilities, have been here for a very long time, and make a significantly different salary.
Okay.
And if we were to go to the ticket model, would we then incur costs for transportation between buildings?
Yes.
And would that offset the savings?
It would be minimal. We think we would try to, obviously, we would try to cluster the tickets so that you're going here today and we wouldn't have people running back and forth, but we would try to minimize it, and we think it would be a minimal offset. It would be some of the savings, but we wouldn't think it would be a significant part of the savings.
Like going from Jones to Lee is not going to happen.
Yeah.
Going to a ticket type model, I assume in the present model we have technicians who have projects or tasks or are addressing issues every day, or?
Yes.
Right, a ticket model would suggest you don't need someone in the building all week.
yeah.
So I'm trying to understand what
One
that
of the
looks like.
downsides would be there's less of an opportunity for teachers to develop relationships with and learn from those technicians. Now, they're not certified teachers. They tend to be more hardware people.
Okay.
But at times, yes, a teacher might say, I'm doing a project and it's really tech heavy, and can you be around every
help?
day for the next week because this is going to be really necessary.
Okay.
And with a building-based model, that can happen. With a ticket model, that will happen less. Now, obviously, one reduction is minimal, right? You'll still be able to maintain some of that, but if that one creeps to two or even more, then you're going to see much more of that. And it's going to be someone coming into a building that you may have not met before who's coming to your room to fix your computer. And that's different than it being, right, the person who's here every day that you've gotten to know over the last 3 or 4 years.
Okay. Thank you.
We have also, last year, we added 4 curriculum stipends. There was a question last week, and I can't honestly remember now if it was during the full board meeting or during the curriculum meeting, but there was a question about doing some more out of the curriculum office, and we noted that in a lot of other districts, the curriculum office would include partial or full FTEs of 3 or 4 people who work in the curriculum office as subject area specialists. We have a very thin curriculum office. Last year, we added 4 teacher stipends so that a teacher who's working a full-time schedule draws a few extra $1,000s to be available to work with Amity on project work outside of contract time. We're suggesting this year that we withdraw those 4 stipends. We were hoping to be able to double those this year. Originally, I think we had proposed 12. The model last year was if we can get 4 now and 4 next year and 4 the year after. But if we're not going to be able to add 4 this year, and considering the pressures on all the other areas of the districts, it's a small savings, but we're suggesting not filling those 4 stipends next year as we move forward. A larger savings, and I think we talked about this last week, there is a total spend of just over $300,000 in textbooks this year. About $60,000 of that spend is at the building level, primarily on consumables, and $237,000 was going to be at the district level, associated to a social studies curriculum update and new materials. We are suggesting that we defer that purchase. We'll continue working on the curricular update, but we will work with the existing history, geography, social studies texts for 1 more year, and we will defer a $237,000 district-wide textbook purchase. It doesn't impact the building level budgets, as I mentioned. They're much smaller.
And you said, I think last time I put in my notes too, is that we're still buying some textbooks. This is just a significant reduction.
Yes.
To hold off until next year. We're still buying some.
In one targeted area. Remember that we sort of moved those big purchases around. The last couple of years, the big purchases have been in literacy materials at the youngest grades associated with the science of reading. Social studies tends to be the one that always gets delayed. Our last social studies renewal was put off 6, 7, 8 years. So again, I'm going to use the word deferring, not canceling, not cutting, but it's not an expenditure we need to take on this year, and it's a significant number.
Which, I'm just going to say it out loud, would make it also a significant number to add back in next year.
Correct. Yes.
I mean, just name what we're talking
There's-
about.
But there's got to be ways to break that down.
I'm not
Yep.
making an opinion about that, but just keeping that in mind. There are
It
things
doesn't
we defer
necessarily mean we
to.
need to eat it all next year.
No.
We could just continue to
I'm just
defer out
I'm
for a
just
few years if we
naming,
need to, yeah.
We
as we
might
talk
not
about a
add it
number
all
of
back
things
next year.
to defer, we may
Yes.
find ourselves not being able to add everything back in
That's
either. It's just
a reduction of this scale will not be made up in 1 year, right? And again, that's why it's important that we look at 1 or 2 FTEs in multiple places and not 7 in one area.
And I will be completely honest and say that with the cut of the curricular stipends, it's going to be very challenging for me
To make the timeline.
to figure out how to purchase the right textbooks.
okay.
So, a couple questions on the social studies and the curriculum stipends. When was the last time that we updated the social, like, what is this replacing? How long ago did we last update the social studies texts?
That I cannot say. The last time the 2 times ago that the standards were updated was, I want to say 2017, and then the new standards came out last year. So this was looking to be responsive to the newest standards. My guess is that it was probably roughly 2017 the last time we looked at resources.
Okay.
We won't be the only district that is not catching up with the new standards released last year, this year, if we make this kind of adjustment.
Okay. Do we have a deadline of when we do need to catch up with them? No. Okay, and then for the curricular stipends, is that something where you're saying if we're not able to add 4 more this year, 4 more next year, the 4 that we have sort of don't work? Or, like, in a perfect world, would you at least keep these 4? Like, I want to make sure I'm understanding the value of the 4 that we currently have.
In a better world, we would keep the 4. In a perfect world, we'd actually be building out full FTE positions. Lots of districts, lots of comparable districts have a district-wide curriculum specialist for English language arts, and one for math, and one for science, and one for social studies, and then sometimes one who covers the arts, which is everything else. In a perfect world, I'd be here saying that this year we're adding the first of 5 FTEs, and I'm going to be coming to you in 5 consecutive years asking to actually build out a curriculum office. Curriculum office is a euphemism because it means Dr. Goss.
So we are finding value in the current 4 that we have.
There is still value in the work that they are able to provide, but under the pressures of this nature, again, right, I would just suggest that it's better to hold off and come back with a new proposal next year or the year after when we've had time to rethink it,
Okay, thank you.
even though it's a relatively small reduction.
And not to keep going on this, but you threw out a bunch of different topics for the textbooks. Do you have some sort of a breakdown where maybe this year, instead of getting rid of that whole amount of 237, maybe we say, we'll reduce it, but we'll keep the history books this year and science
break it
books
up by
next
grade
year? Like, do you
level
have like a
and
breakdown like
Right,
that?
so those are social studies materials specifically because that's one of the areas
Right.
in revision right now. So we could do course by course.
Grade level by grade level.
By grade level, they were intended for 7-12, so it would probably be 7th grade, 8th grade, or then a course at the high school. We could do it that way.
So yes, if you were to chunk it into 6ths, we could cut it by half, we could cut it by 4/6, right? And then still do it for 1 or 2 grade levels, make the purchases.
It would still be impactful, is what
Absolutely,
I'm getting at.
yes.
Okay.
I'll note for the board, I think many board members recognized it. This year was unusual in that we did not have requests to add coaches or assistant coaches to the budget this year. Most years, we add 1 or 2, at least assistant coaching positions, if not head coaching positions. I have spoken with Mr. Jarvis and made it clear that he will need to find reductions in 3 assistant coaching positions. He and I are going to have a meeting and look at whether that makes most sense to do last in, first out, or whether we look at enrollment and look at supervision. We also know that we have been very fortunate with some of the booster organizations in town who have funded these additional positions. So making reductions of this nature might be shifting this burden off to fundraising and car washes. But again, I do not want to be looking at instructional positions and not looking at the athletic program as well, which also leads to the next 2 suggestions. For a long time now, the board has had a working target of 10, that we would not run an athletic program if we weren't benefiting at least 10 students. Cheerleading has now fallen below that level. Now, cheerleading has been a program that has been on again and off again, but cheerleading runs 2 seasons. We have not enrolled 10 students or more in the cheerleading program, so we would suggest that we do not staff a cheerleading program next year. That would be a reduction of almost $8,000.
How many are they running?
I'm sorry?
How many are there? How many students are involved?
7 or 8. It's below the 10. It is
Do
not
they know
0.
that they're on the chopping block at this point? Like, I feel like if there's not a discussion with that organization about the fact that they might lose funding if they don't have 10, they could work to get 10.
So, no, I have not met with I've met with Mr. Jarvis. I have not met with the cheerleading coach or the students or parents who are currently enrolled in cheerleading this year. But it is a target, it's an informal target that this board talked about a number of years ago.
Yeah.
This is a different board. right?
No. Again, this is not an opinion about this reduction, but I believe when cheerleading wanted to come back on, it was a discussion that it would require
Yes,
10 students.
that you stay at 10.
So it's not just that has been a kind of threshold we've used in the past,
mentioned.
but it was communicated.
It was communicated very clearly when we brought it back.
Yes.
But to be fair, no, I have not met with anybody. We've been working on this list for the last 3 weeks daily, and no, I haven't met with anybody. Now, the next line goes further. In this one, I said that this is not this is a recommendation to sort of put things in perspective. Were we to eliminate all the athletic offerings at Adams, it would be a savings of approximately $72,000. I'm not recommending that we do that. But again, when pressured to try to make a list that got to 1.6 million, we didn't even make 1.6 million. The 1.5 would include that number. And that is not one that I'm recommending tonight. It is simply a number that I've put here by way of illustration. And you know, to respond to some comments that we heard, if we were to start to make a teacher's salary, you would have to look at the entire athletic program at Adams before you could get to one teaching salary to make that be an offset. Right. That's essentially why the number's been placed there. It's to make that scale clear.
But one of the things you can do with sports that we're not doing with sports right now is corporate funding. And I know we've talked about this. I see it at nearly every single high school that I go to. Signs in the outfields, signs on the scoreboard. These are very good revenue areas in which it takes the burden away from the budget. Why isn't it something that we've shied away from?
It would require a policy. I would want to see that go through the policy committee at the board. Right now, we do not advertise at our student athletic events. It's not unusual for us to be approached by Coca-Cola and for them to tell us that they will replace our scoreboard with a new top-end scoreboard. But 25% of it is a Coca-Cola advertisement, and the rest of it is a really nice scoreboard. It's absolutely an area that we could explore, but I would want to do that with the policy committee and then in public with the board, and certainly invite public comment. Yeah. I will note that at a much earlier point in my career, it's something that we explored in another school district. We put together a full presentation, and ultimately the board did not want to see us go in that direction.
I'm just saying it's worth exploring, right?
Absolutely.
It's one of the very few areas in which we can take funds from other places, right? And I think there's been a lot of vocal support for athletics, right? This was the 1 year that we have not heard anything.
Yeah. I was really surprised.
And I could guarantee you, as soon as things start getting removed from athletics, you hear from people.
And the other option, which is also not on the list tonight, but the other option is that you go in the other direction and you establish a pay-for-play model. And it tends to fall at the high school level, and there are family caps, but where you say to the families that if your child wants to participate and makes the cut to play on a varsity team, that there is then a fee associated with that. And it's often a fee per athlete per season with caps for families or individuals. There's a lot of surrounding communities that have a pay-for-play program. And again, it's neither one of those made the list tonight. They're both areas that we could talk about. I've got reservations about both, really different reservations about both. I would not want to see us move in a pay-for-play direction because we have such a generous community that does a lot of that on their own without needing us to structure it for them. And I hesitate about advertising on our student activities for differing reasons. But
I don't disagree with you on that. I know that is a box once you open, it gets very complicated. It's clearly working in other districts. Yep. Right? I go to many high school fields, and we see it. And again, you mentioned Coca-Cola. These are mostly local brands. These are mostly local companies that are advertising. It's just an idea.
And we could build all of those guardrails around it, right? We could say that it would only be for local, right? We could say we could put a lot of limits on it.
I know the school itself doesn't have a pay-for-play, but essentially, I think with every sport, there is a pay-to-play. There's dues, and there's the booster clubs, and parents are expected to pay a set amount, I think, depending upon each sport. So
I don't know if
Right,
it's-
and I think that would still be expected
It
and
is a
dues to pay to
donation.
play.
It is a donation. to
It
the
is a
booster.
donation, but, you know.
Yeah, but I think the kids can still participate in the sport if you took that away.
100%, 100%.
Yeah,
But
so
the
that's-
booster clubs are what help make this district so good.
Well,
Absolutely.
and
It's not a requirement.
it's an extraordinary number of, of booster clubs, right? And
Yeah.
an extraordinary number of parents and community members supporting
And again,
athletic.
talking about how like some of the ideas that I'm presenting tonight being a little contrary, right? If we're suggesting that eliminating 3 coaching positions, but hoping that the boosters would pick that up, putting a pay-for-play model in place would very much dampen the activities that the boosters engage in voluntarily, and we would be turning it into something that was a requirement. And so I would rather not move in that direction. It just, as we're talking about advertising, I think that there's probably an equal number of communities that engage in pay-for-play as engage in providing some kind of advertising opportunity to local or larger vendors.
It's also the case that we have argued in the past that athletics is more than an extra. That is,
Absolutely.
as a co-curricular activity with such wide participation and all the virtues of amateur athletics, that a pay-for-play model for athletics is, we would not say pay-for-play for classrooms.
No.
So, and then to the degree that we think athletics is an important endeavor, particularly for social emotional growth, blah, blah, that's a really slippery slope to go into. I mean, we've already corporatized sports in this country and to the point where it's really a shame. And the fact that we've got to start thinking about it, I think we really want to be careful about that.
I completely agree. And I just want to reiterate, of all the items on the list, the idea of eliminating middle school sports completely is more as an illustration than any of the other items where I said, this is a little less conservative, it's more of a liability, I'd rather not go backwards, but going backwards a little bit is, this is a whole cut, and we put it there because anything other than a whole cut doesn't even get to the level of a single FTE. And it's the problem with 80% of our budget being associated with FTEs and benefits. It makes it really hard to make equivalent reductions without doing significant harm. Jal Mehta out of Harvard uses a supermarket analogy. He says, just as all of the best food in the supermarket is all around the edges, much of the best learning in schools happens all around the edges, in the co-curriculars and in the athletic programming. And the benefit the kids get out of that for that dollar amount is significant. I just needed to put it there for public conversation. Which isn't exactly, it's similar, but not to the same level of how passionate I am about site improvements. So again, we've worked really hard over more than 15 years now to work ourselves out of a maintenance deficit in most of our buildings. 6 of our 7 buildings are in really good shape, and Adams is in good shape considering that it's 90 years old. And we've worked really hard, and we've been really committed to doing that. That's been through 2 real efforts. One has been the capital budget investments that we've made separate and apart from the operational budget, but one has been through a much smaller but continuing investment through the site improvement line. We have said every year that we'd like to target 1% of the overall operational budget to this ongoing fluid maintenance fund. In a year like this year, where we are suggesting things like I'm putting all middle school sports on a list to talk about publicly, I am suggesting that while it is going backwards, we are in a good position now. If we're already at flat funding of site improvement. If we were to reduce it by $100,000, it's buying back that maintenance deficit, but it's going to be slow. And I do believe that we will be able to rebuild from there. Dr. Balistraci, to your point, if we go backwards, it makes the investment to get up to 1% bigger than just missing a year.
Pushing the can.
But by comparison, $100,000 reduction in site improvements is close to 2 teaching positions that we're talking about. And I'm willing to make that kind of reduction and and continue to work. Now, again, when you add that, compound that with custodial positions and a maintenance position and reduced site improvement, you're beginning to tempt that kind of maintenance deficit. But I think it is an unprecedented year, and we need to make difficult decisions. And there's a lot of blank lines. There are several blank lines underneath. There is no suggestion on our part that these are the only areas that we could or should be discussing. These are simply the ones that we've wrestled with over the last few weeks to bring to you. And we're certainly welcome and will entertain any questions or responses to other ideas.
At the risk of kind of diverting the train here, but just because we were just talking about athletics and Mrs. Trudeau provided us with more information.
On the stipends, there was a question about the number of stipends last
We want to
meeting.
make sure that, I believe the GHS electricity is a new answer as well. So there was a question about, we were talking about electricity last Thursday. The Guilford High School Energy Project has a 6-year payback, and we have made 27 of the 70 payments to date. The budget for the 26-27 was built based on actual expenses from the prior year. I think we all remember how far over the budget line we ended up in electricity last year. Guilford High School electricity for the 25-26 year was $437,625.79. And then also provided us with number of athletic head coaches, assistant coaches, co-curricular advisors, specialized coordinators, curriculum coordinators at the high school, at Adams, at Baldwin, district-wide. Department chair coordinators, team leaders, instructional coaches, specialists, and then some stipend information. So thanks very much. This is a lot of information.
Going back to the GHS Energy Project, 27 of 70 payments. What's the cost per payment?
$6,600 a month. Just under $75,000 a year, I think.
I'm going to ask, I asked this last year, I think I asked it before, I'm just going to ask it again anyway. Substitute teachers increasing by another 23,000 for next year based on, I assume,
Actual expenditure.
actual expenditures and expectations.
We raised the rate a little bit to try and attract more substitutes, and then are based on our actual usage.
Okay.
Principals, I think, will tell you it continues to be one of the most pressing daily needs is being able to cover the classes that need to be covered. And Mr. Hamill has been interviewing substitutes and trying to grow that pool. He had 2 interviews in his office last week. It's just difficult to find subs. But it's becoming more difficult to find them as there's a greater need, right? We're experiencing absenteeism at a rate that we need to cover. We need to be able to fill those classes for our students.
Yep. And I'm looking at my list here. You've provided us with some considerations around a number of different positions. Coaches, interventionists, custodians, paras, et cetera. Network technician, in several cases you suggested 1 or maybe 2. With network technician 1, I'm assuming that the choice was not 2 for a reason where it might be 2 in other areas.
It's a smaller net to begin with, and so
Right.
we're only talking about a total cohort of 9.
Okay.
And so again, it's just when we're looking at custodians, paraprofessionals, we're talking about approximately 95
Right.
positions that we're looking
No.
at. Teachers, we're looking at 355. It's the single, right? And so when you get to those very small ends,
Yep.
it could absolutely be 2. We do believe that, every time that number goes up, it's less likely that we're able to cover it through attrition and more likely that somebody is being laid off. But that is a number that could be 2.
Yeah.
Can you remind us, I want to turn back to the new administrative request.
Yes.
I know it's 550 plus or minus at the elementary schools. How many at the middle and high school did you guys have this last year? Do you remember approximately? I'm not going to hold you to an exact number.
Right, so you're talking about PPT facilitation. I had mentioned that last year, right now, the model is three 10-month special education coordinators covering the elementary, middle, and high levels. The coordinator at the elementary level facilitated somewhere north of 500 PPT meetings last year. At both the middle and high school level, they facilitated slightly over 300 PPTs. So by splitting the elementary level, where we have some of the most complicated PPTs, because they all tend to be new, those 2 coordinators would have fewer than the coordinators at the middle or high school level, which we think would be a more appropriate model than having close to double what they're carrying at the other levels.
Hear me out. What if, again, because we're talking like actual people getting cut and things like that, what if we redistributed, at least for a couple of years, the middle and high school coordinators to help fill out the elementary until we were in a better budget cycle, which I always hope for, where then we can really sustain a brand new administrator?
You could
Is that something that is possible even?
You could absolutely do that. When I came on board, there were 2 special education coordinators. They had gone from 3 a few years ago, reduced to 2, and we built back. The grade level model allows those people to at least try to focus right on a set of schools. And so if we need to, and I haven't included it on this list, but it's a new item this year.
Right.
It would be approximately $143,000 or $147,000 reduction to not fill that position. I would tell you that we would get through with 3, but I would want to rely on Mr. Scanziano and the coordinators to figure out the best model. That might be the way to go, but I would want, rather than saying that I'll move half of this school here and half, right, I would let them make that determination about how best to cover. There is another opportunity, and one of the ways that we could look at it, you do not have to necessarily be a certified administrator to chair a PPT.
Right.
So we could look at tapping teachers to chair those.
I think this is what SEPTO had proposed.
There's a possibility to do that. We might want to associate stipends with that. I just don't think that that's as solid a model. And again, I want to go back to the recommendation that the New Solutions Group made to us. The New Solutions Group said to us, and included a quote from a teacher, "You have the resources that you need to do a good job here. You're not using or deploying or managing those resources as well as you could be." A teacher quote was that sometimes I feel like an air traffic controller rather than. I think that we need to pull those air traffic control duties away from the teachers and create that management level. I don't think anybody would suggest that we should have fewer air traffic controllers and more flight attendants. So, right, I honestly believe that, and again, I'll go back to the additions that we have this year represent less than 0.25%. They were already covered by the tuition reductions that we're making. If we're making even further tuition reductions, we could handle 3 again for 1 more year if we had to, but we would be back, I think, asking for an administrator in a following year.
And I understand that. And listen, I well know that the tough years are usually the elementary, middle would be definitely a close second. But, right, you're talking about cutting actual people.
Well-
I think it's something to consider, and maybe you guys can talk about it and let us know. Or
Well, so I absolutely appreciate that, but I do want to note that if we're talking about creating opportunities for attrition right, so again, as we did with the interventionist positions, we said that if we try to target our own people, it could help us with a budgeting number. If we were to create that administrative opportunity this year, and if we were to work really hard, or at least give the opportunity for that to go to one of our in-house people, then that could be a leadership opportunity, a growth opportunity for a teacher, and would then cover one of the classroom reductions that we're talking about having to absorb. It's a lot of ifs. I understand it's a lot of ifs, but it's a way to create a possible opportunity and maybe create lemonade out of a lot of lemons that we're creating with some other decisions this year.
And for people listening, the No Solutions group was the group that we brought in to assess our approach to special ed and special services within the district.
New Solutions, we asked them to come in and
Sorry.
look. Did
Said
you
it
know
wrong.
Solutions?
No Solutions.
Yeah. No Solutions would be a terrible name for a consultant.
There was a reason that no one was
They're now out of business.
marketing position.
I wasn't sure if I heard that funny.
No. That was
Terrible name for a consultant group.
That is truly a terrible name. Terrible name.
It's okay to write a business now.
Yes,
Well,
and-
that's right.
And again, that report exists on our website. So, and several times we've asked outside organizations to come in and look at our practice and give us recommendations. And like all of those reports, the New Solution report is on our website. And again, I want to reiterate, in the last 5 years, in the area of special services, we have added 11.5 teaching positions in those special education teachers, school psychologists, school social workers, because our students have emerging needs. We have added 13 and a half paraprofessional positions. So this year, right, the idea of adding to the management level that supports those teaching positions and the students and the families that those teachers support, I think is important to note. And again, when we're talking about some possible para reductions, we've increased by 13.5 over the last 5 years. We're talking about a possible reduction of as many as 9 this year, right? When you look at the two sort of buckets that we've created. We've been really trying to look not just at 1 year answers, but look at the history of what we've been doing and how not to lose everything that we've been building and spread these reductions that are going to need to be made out thoughtfully.
What am I trying to say? As I said, I think about textbooks, but just as we're considering a number of different things and likely going to make have to make some hard choices. Just some kind of personal opinion thoughts on perhaps a slightly higher level, but I said it around the paras. I get concerned about reducing things that
Just have to have that.
that we're going to be adding back in, because that means
That's a
we are
guarantee.
essentially,
It's a guarantee.
that's essentially, we are taking money out of the budget and we're going to have to find it somewhere else next year, right? Like, I agree. We know that we will make decisions about class size, enrollment, teaching positions. But we have in the past, and did it this past year, had to add to kindergarten.
Correct.
So I want us, and I'm sure all of you are keeping this in mind, so maybe some of this is for the community listening, just really concerned about making any cuts in which we are going to then have to find other money to pay for positions.
And Dr. Balistraci, that's a little bit of the downside of spreading. I think that there's no other model other than spreading a lot of little cuts across a lot of different areas. The problem there is that when we cut every line in the budget down so
That's where I'm
fine
going
and
next.
one runs into deficit, there's nowhere else from
There's
which
nowhere
to
else to
transfer
go.
the funds in to make up the deficit. And so that is what I mean when I say that while I may not think any of the ideas on this list are really good ideas, adding all of them together and taking a $1.5 million cut is a really bad idea, because then if we missed here, we don't have the ability to transfer funds from somewhere where we didn't miss. And
Well, and then my other concern is that, and this is in no way a criticism, it is a kind of a way to talk about each of these. The number of times that each of these items could be deferred until next year.
Yes.
Bringing back one item is going to be hard. I can't imagine we're going to be in a budget position next year to replace various positions that we've removed in this process.
No, they're not all,
So-
they're not all being deferred to next year. Some are being deferred for a year, some for 2, some for 4, some for 6.
Right. And the other thing that I'm just struggling with, although, again, you've given us a lot to think about, is how many positions are in this list, right?
And again, that's the reason for the middle school illustration, right?
Right.
If we back off on the FTEs that are on this list, it then becomes that much harder, and you start looking at things like a whole athletic program at 2 grades, or to get to those sorts of numbers in the 23% of the budget that isn't represented by salaries and benefits becomes really, really challenging.
So I have a couple of suggestions here. One is, are there other budget items that any of my colleagues have a question about, want to hear about, that we haven't considered over the last several meetings or
That
haven't
was my
been
feet,
brought
I'm
up
sorry.
tonight?
A lot of nervous energy over here. I'm sorry, I started tapping my feet on the floor, and it was really distracting. It was not an earthquake, it was just me tapping on
Is
the
there,
floor.
so I do want to open it up, and that, you may think of it later, and then
Yeah, a couple
we'll ask it. Okay, go ahead.
Page 77. When we had our caucus, we were just unsure about some of the definitions.
Other contracted services.
Oh, yeah.
What is adult education?
Adult education is a state mandate. It is a requirement that we provide in addition to education for students through their high school graduation, or alternately the end of the school year in which they turn 22 years old. We're also responsible for providing to the community a series of adult educational opportunities. Those would include English as a learned language for residents who don't speak English. They would include the ability to complete a GED. They include some general adult education, including a full alternate high school diploma, which is different than a GED. We provide that service by partnering with Branford, North Branford, and Clinton, and we provide it through the Shoreline Adult Services. They are housed in Branford High School. They charge us the dollar amount that you see here proposed, and they have been doing an exceptional job. For the last 4 years, I believe, we have seen no program increase costs coming from them. I met with their director 2 or 3 times during this budget cycle, and again this year, while Linda, we're absorbing a slight reduction in state grants, but we're not absorbing an increase from them to provide their services. And again, we're required to provide that to the community as part of a free and appropriate public education.
Okay, what's library?
That's the,
The Follett and the other service,
no, it's the Learn Library,
is that the electronic library that we subscribe to?
I don't think so. I don't think we paid for this.
I have to get to the exact definition. Hang on, I'll to look it up.
Bothers me when it's not off the top of my head. but
That's all right.
we're
We
gonna
were
need a minute.
unsure about a lot of what, just definition-wise.
Yep.
And then district media support. This is obviously different than our tech guys that we just spoke about a few minutes ago.
Yeah, I'm going to need help on that one as well.
I have a couple questions.
Why don't I say that we'll get back to you?
Yeah,
Are there
okay.
other items on this page, and we will get a written
We
response?
kind of just wanted like definitions of each of them. We just didn't know
Yep.
exactly what
We
they were.
will send out written definitions for all of the items on page 77. So
Great,
Linda, we
thank
don't
you.
have to keep searching for those now. We'll get you.
Fabulous, thank you.
Yeah, we won't do, we will
And
skip
really, we were just
SRO,
wondering,
and do
like,
we
if
want to do
anything was
school?
like double booked, like we were kind of just hoping for a typo somewhere, like, oh gosh, that's also in a different area, like.
I appreciate that. We've done a lot of that, but we'll get you definitions on
Okay.
these. We won't include SRO, and do you want us to write to school lunch debt? We've talked a
No.
lot about that at policy, but we'll get you a short definition on everything else.
Yeah, short is perfect,
Yep.
just so we know exactly what we're talking about.
You got it.
Thank you very much.
I have two small ones. Again, I think we're going to be talking about smaller ones now. And these are more questions along the lines of how I've asked in the past, what happens if we were to just freeze them
Yep.
to our current budget, and that is professional development and travel.
So professional development currently includes some work that we've been doing over a number of years and slight increases from the service providers. And so again, we've been involved in instructional and math work that we've been doing with other districts. And to continue that work, the work that we've been doing with Harvard, the Ed Ethics program out of Harvard, and we had them come present to you. If it wasn't last year, it was the year before. What else would be in there? So if we were to freeze it, we would need to possibly call some of those providers and ask them to walk back an increase that they had suggested to us, or make some forced choices among what we were doing.
Yeah, we would be cutting things because I don't think they would make it cheaper for us.
I asked specifically because of the way it shows the increases. It shows that 8 schools are in line with spending from last year. It shows an increase of $9,000 at the high school, which is where the majority of the increase is coming, and then a new line item for the budget, which is pupil services, which is a plus $5,000.
Right, so the
Is that
pupil
CT cents, is it?
I think it's generally special. There was a lot of space before we had this Ed Growth Plan, people were under the impression that they could not attend professional learning outside of the school district. And once they realized that that was actually part of their professional responsibility, then they started to ask. But then there were certain places where we didn't have line items built in. So that's where we see the pupil services increase, some of the high school increase. The district line really is focused on making sure that we could maintain some of the networks that we've been part of. And go ahead.
So to some degree, there was also some caution in there because we were being cautious about the possible loss of the federal grants, and at times we moved some of those expenses into the federal grants. We do know that the Trump administration has withdrawn their appeal on the Dear Colleague letter. So let us take a look at that line and come back next week and tell you whether or not we think we could absorb a reduction of the increase or even entertain a flat line there.
I don't think we're going to have Title I or II next year.
Even with the repeal?
Yes.
Okay. So we will have more conversation about that. I don't know that we're optimistic that we're going to come back with a suggestion of a reduction, but I appreciate
Certainly
the
will
question.
look, yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate the
Sounded
question.
hopeful for a second.
Yeah, he did.
We'll take another look.
And then the same for travel. You know, it was, I only noticed it because it's usually, travel is usually one of those ones that's tied to fuel. Fuel is fortunately down right now. We don't know if it'll stay there, but we're showing an increase of 14%. So I just wonder if that could be flatlined.
Can you remind us why we're looking at the increase in travel?
So it's,
Mostly on the district side?
Actual?
yeah, it's based on actual. So it's the number of travel that we pay for professional development. It's the amount of travel that we pay for people who work between schools and travel between schools.
Yep.
It's the increase in the IRS rate for
Mileage.
travel mileage.
The mileage rate.
So it was based on the actual spending.
I mean, right, like, I even said, I'm supposed to do an obligation for UConn Law School, and I was like, I can't go because I've got this other trip planned, you got to pick between trips. You know, maybe it's something where not as many, I know it's building the connections is half the bonus of going to these programs, but maybe it needs to be more of an online sort of training course. Again, just while the world is the way it is right now, we all have to tighten those belts, and
We could try to take a look. I don't know, Linda, I don't know how difficult this would be, but my guess is that it's not an enormous portion of it that is related to PD out of the district, that a large portion of it is related to travel within the district. So for instance, I know that in last year's budget, we reduced a PE position that had been full-time at the high school that now travels between two schools.
Yes.
So the more that we make those kinds of reductions,
Yes. That we're gonna increase the
the ticket
right.
system that we talked about, there was already a question about,
Right.
will going to a ticket system create more travel? It will. And so, yes, we
Yeah.
can look at it. Maybe, Linda, I don't know if it's going to be hard to do. Again, I say we will do something, and it usually means I'm asking somebody else to do it. Maybe by Monday, we'll be able to talk about how much of the last year's actual spend was out of district compared to in-district travel. That might help give us a sense.
My last one was just out of curiosity. It was a new line. I can't seem to find it here. It was assistant to the athletic director.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so that's actually been in the budget for a while. We did fill that. That is a teacher stipend, and so we did fill that position this year. The person who has moved into that stipend has been helping us with things like the end of the season survey that went out to all parents of athletes at the end of the fall season. There will be another one that goes out the end of winter and the end of spring. They're helping us with the Gipper social media presence, where we're pushing more information out. It is somebody who, for a small amount of dollars, is helping us with parent communication. They're looking currently at helping us to revise the entire athletic handbook, and it is somebody who's working with Mr. Jarvis in the athletic department. Again, we talk about the athletic department. That is Mr. Jarvis and a clerical position that's connected to him. So this was.
I just wanted to understand, we all know the clerical position very well. I just wanted to see if there was any overlap there. I didn't know what that was.
No, and again, another opportunity for a teacher who may have aspirations to be an athletic director to start to learn that process and to start to see that office and be part of that. It was similar to the curricular stipends. Rather than creating a position, it's a stipend for $5,000 that draws a teacher who works beyond the contract day and helps out in that area. And we've seen some really exciting work coming out of that investment this year.
Is that 10 or 12 months?
That is 10 months. It's just the stipend. And we're planning on coming in at an operations meeting probably in March or April and talking about that at greater depth with the board at the operations meeting.
Great.
That stipend previously was under the athletic coaching line.
Okay.
And we just moved it over to the co-curricular for better reporting of what it really is.
Very good.
It's not new money in the budget.
Got it. Thank you.
Where do, I'm probably just missing it in the budget here, ticket sales, as things associated with, sporting events or shows or whatnot, where does that show up in the
It
budget?
shows
in terms of
it
revenue?
shows as a $15,000.
Yeah.
It's what we refer to as the activity line.
Yeah, so the ticket sales actually goes to the student activity account, and it's separate from our budget, but those funds are used for a number of different things. So ticket sales goes to repairing equipment, whatever our budget doesn't cover for supplies, for officials' fees, other facility use fees, anything that our budget doesn't cover, those funds out of the student activity fund will cover.
Often, if we have multiple teams who make a deep run into postseason playoff, the budget that we've built won't always cover the transportation. If it's an away game, the officials' fees if we're hosting a home game, and so oftentimes those gate receipts will offset those costs. They have paid for replacing scoreboards in the past, so if we save them up, we'll replace a piece of equipment, but oftentimes they're being used to cover shortfalls in the athletic program.
And the student activity fund is monitored every month, not only at the school level, but also by my office. And it does get audited every year, so it is a monitored account where all these funds are from athletics and then a number of other sources.
Linda signs off on any of those expenditures, and if it's anything creative or unusual, so do I.
Other questions on other lines that haven't?
All right. What time is it? 9:10? A couple possibilities here. We can start to talk about any of these lines. We can, or others that we want to consider. We can start with some easy ones and determine if we're all on the same page. I certainly know I have a lot to think about. So there are a number of these that I'm going to want to do some further
We should
thought.
probably start with, I was thinking, we're talking here about orders of magnitude.
Yes.
So that some of the items we described now are very micro. We got to find a lot of dollars. My target would be to try to get to 1%. That would be about half of what was presented to us. The principle being that we take money from groups that is the most distant from direct student or impacting students or teachers. And I have a package here as a starting package that adds up to about close to $800,000. If you look at what Paul gave us, there's really 4 clusters. And I would argue that the first cluster adds up to $282,000. I would skip the second cluster, which deals with the teachers, coaches, and interventionists. Third cluster, if we kept it all, is $411,000, give or take, and $100,000 from site improvement. Therefore, not pushing, not dealing with athletics or textbooks. We'd come up to about $793,000, which is a little under 1%.
Just for the viewing audience, I want to just note that first cluster is the decrease in the tuition line in special transportation and in regular transportation for the reasons that our administrators have shared with us, including a change in the prediction in the excess cost grant, a change in the vehicles that would be used for VOAG and vinyl transportation, a change in the approach to funding the students that participate in the STRIVE program.
That's helpful.
Yeah, sorry, I just,
And that may, that's already, that's on top of the 8 positions that have already been taken out of the budget.
Correct.
And so anything more than that, we could find a few dollars here and there that I've left out if people needed to do that. But at the order of magnitude we're talking about, those are the big chunks I can see that sort of gets us to as much as $800,000 of savings without being irresponsible about it.
My numbers are very similar to yours. There's a few kind of that wave in between, the yeses and the maybe group for me, but I'm right around that same number right now.
We can say let's not take more than $650,000. And come in at 6.3%. But I've tried to get below that, and it really gets dicey about really doing harm instructionally.
I was going to say, I'm in the same ballpark, but I kind of spread it out, obviously, more. Obviously, that top 4 that you just described in more detail, obviously, but, 1 instructional coach, 1 interventionist, maybe 1 teacher, half a custodian, non-instructional paras, the network technician, maybe a little bit from site improvement, but, the same ideas where you just spread the wealth over the course. But, if the district's willing to consider not hiring the administrator, that's almost $150,000 that is in savings this year that we could definitely take up in future years that could be absorbed.
Which administrator is that?
So
The
not
special ed
hiring the coordinator for the elementary school and redistributing the middle and high schools to help out the elementary coordinator for at least a year or 2. until the budget, until hopefully the economy gets better, everything looks better, and then we can talk about hiring an actual position, because the numbers at the elementary school are going to stay high,
Yeah,
right? So that is going to happen, I think.
I would just suggest that for what it is worth, I would much rather see the textbook line put on hold, right? It's a change to match a state requirement that a number of people are going to miss out on. The books that we have are reasonable, because I do see that as a continuing and emerging need. What I heard from the parents is that while they were more excited about ground level positions, and while they may have come to it grudgingly, that if this administrative position improves the student and parent experience, then they would get behind it. And I would tell you that is exactly the reason that we are proposing it, because it will improve the student and parent and teacher experience at those grade levels by having that level of support. And so, again, I appreciate the suggestions that are here. I'd be curious to see if Linda has run it yet to see what a reduction of 793 does to the percent increase. But I would rather see a partial or full reduction to that. We could reduce the textbook line by that 150,000 and still not completely eliminate the textbook line, and provide in both of those areas, at least partially.
So we're already hearing some discussion emerge, and folks coming at it slightly differently. I'd like to ask, and anything we're discussing tonight, is not final. Nothing's final till we vote. But is there anyone among us who has concerns about these first four, and I'll repeat them again, considerations? Tuition with an adjustment of the excess cost, grant reimbursement expectation, regular transportation, so that's 77,850 reduction, 75,000 in regular transportation, again with the change from full buses to vans for some of our transportation, a different approach to funding students involved and engaged in the STRIVE program, which would be 100,000 reduction, and special transportation for 30,000. So again, a total reduction of 282,850. Is there anyone who has concerns about any of those four?
No.
I'm aligned with those.
No. That makes good sense.
Okay.
It's a good start.
So I just want to name that and start adding.
The rest is where we're all going to have it.
Well, I am going to come at it, and maybe this is not the best way, but I am going to come at it at least from one place. I am really, I don't like most of these things. I am really against the idea of getting rid of middle school sports. And I would love to just cross that
Well,
off.
that's easy.
Any further
Just take it all the way off the list?
Take it off the list.
There's just so many reasons I would find that really problematic. And then there's a lot in the middle, right? We're hearing, really trying to avoid curricular positions related to teaching, instruction, coaching, intervention, and focus on some of the other positions if we have to think about other positions. And then we're hearing more of us spreading things across. Again, I'm just going to note, I am happy to entertain any of these conversations. I'm not sure I'm ready to make any.
Again, I think it's reiterating that while we are suggesting maybe moving away from further discussion about the teaching positions, at this moment in time, the budget is down by 8 positions total, 7 of which are teaching positions and 1 of which is a clerical position. So to move the conversation to look at those non-teaching positions isn't to suggest that teachers aren't being reduced. They've already been reduced in this budget by 7 positions.
Yes.
My thought is if we are knowingly reducing by 7 teaching positions, I would be very hesitant to then reduce an additional teacher and take away instructional coaches and the interventionists, because my feeling is we need to provide the support for the teachers who are already stretched thin, and we're asking a lot of them.
And we'll see increased class sizes this year as a result of the changes we've already made. That's exactly right.
And
Yeah, so.
yeah, and we want to just continue to keep strides forward on our strong educational outcomes. And so from my perspective, maintaining the supports to keep the teachers able to provide that outstanding education is really important.
Okay.
I would argue that we have a pretty wide decision in terms of custodian. Like we're at 0.5, we're all the way up to 2.0. Just kind of wondering what the overall impact there is. I mean, again, I know we talked about it, but just having a clear understanding of where that lands us. What does a 0.5 versus a 2 look like? Just in terms of the overall impact of the whole entire team.
Yeah, and again, even here at a level of just 2 FTEs, we're following the same model. So this would be 3 part-time custodial positions. I believe 1 falls at the night shift at the high school. The other 2 fall again at night shifts, and I can't remember exactly where. I'd need to check with Mr. Gurnham. But we would be cutting back some partial additions that we have added over the last 4 or 5 years.
I was just going to ask that question. Do you know when they were added?
I'd have to get you more detail on that. And then the last one, the fourth of the four halves, is a night maintenance worker that we added. So somebody who is here in the evenings, who can get into a classroom and fix a broken bookshelf or replace ceiling tiles or a light ballast in the evening when we don't have kids and teachers around. And so I would suggest, again, considering the level of the impact that we're making, considering the comments that were just made about what's already been done to the teaching ranks, we could go to the 2.0. They are spread out. It's 4 partial positions spread across 8 different physical locations. It is very likely the type of thing that we'd want to start building back, but it would be a half a position a year that we'd start looking to build that back. And if next year is not the right year, then next year might not be the year that we do it. And again, that sort of ties to the fact that we've been making a really good we've been making a conscious effort so the buildings aren't in bad shape right now. We can take a breath. I wouldn't want to make this kind of reduction year over year. Then we're going to start seeing a backslide. I'm okay going up to 2 in that area.
I just want to clarify, when you talked about textbooks, instead of the 237,500, you'd be okay if that was 150,000?
Yes.
Or no, or was it?
No,
I was not clear, sorry.
Yeah, and I had started that by saying I hate to make one-to-one comparisons in a budget because it's never a trade-off. But in my mind, when we're talking about the value of adding that 10-month special education administrative position for $147,000 compared to holding on to the full $237,000, I would, if that became a forced choice in and of itself, I'd rather see the textbook reduction, and I'd rather see the whole $237,000 go and still fund that administrative position. It's becoming a real need. I'm worried that we're going to see staff turnover if we're not supporting those staff properly. And
So again, it's not answering my question, though. You said something about 150,000
Yeah.
instead. I don't know what that number was.
I had said I'd rather see the whole 237 go, or we could cut it by 150,000, keep the administrative position for that $157,000 reduction, and we'd still have 80,000 to spend on textbooks in that social studies area, even if it was just for a grade level or 2. That was where I grabbed the 150. It was a rounding error that was confusing in my presentation.
So here's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that we are in agreement about a reduction totaling $282,850. Again, tuition, regular transportation, special transportation. I am hearing some, at least from a couple of our membership, avoiding the additional teacher at the high school, any of the coaches, any of the interventionists.
No, I'm all for cutting some of those.
No,
So, okay, I just want to make sure.
We're not making decisions.
Yeah, yeah.
No. I'm talking about things I am
Okay.
hearing, and thank you. I'm recognizing that doesn't mean everyone agrees. We're obviously having some discussion about textbooks. We're hearing support from our administration for a full reduction there to avoid reductions in other places.
Excuse me.
I don't know where people are at. It's 9:30. I'm feeling like this may be something that folks want to take back and give some additional thought to. We have some outstanding questions that have been asked. And this is not to rush, but I did note the comment that we can have them for you next Monday. If there's a possibility to have them a little sooner and I can distribute.
Absolutely.
Right? It allows that thinking to continue. I would like to ask my colleagues, I'm starting to feel like we have made some inroads here. We want some answers to additional questions. I'm not sure we need a meeting Thursday night if we have a meeting next Monday, but I do want to ask where other people.
I agree. I think one of the healthiest things to do is kind of what we've done in the past, in which we caucus as individual small groups. We
Per
come back.
party, which is
yeah.
allowed within our
Come back with any questions to the administration, and then hopefully on Monday, through this discussion that we've had over the last week and tonight, and any kind of caucus and any kind of back and forth emails, and those sheets are all public, so we'll leave those Google sheets up.
Yep.
We hopefully will be well equipped Monday to have a list of reductions.
We can certainly respond to the questions that we've noted tonight before Monday evening. I was just referencing the next scheduled meeting, but yes, we'll get.
I understood that. I'm trying to determine whether we need a Thursday night meeting or not.
And we could get more, right? We can
Yeah.
handle more questions.
Sure.
If there are questions that come in writing between now and then, we will be able to process those questions as well. And I agree. I think that this has been a really productive conversation. I think we've identified almost $300,000 that has consensus around it, and I'm hearing that there's some direction around some of those other areas. We're happy to help clarify, and I'm really pleased not to miss a conversation about this Thursday night. So I appreciate the sense that Monday will be time enough to have a really thoughtful decision.
If we're not going any further tonight, it's important for us to realize that we're not the only ones making decisions about this budget. And I want to be careful that we're not favoring cuts as an exercise, only in some sense making people out there, particularly the finance board, thinking that those are really eligible things. That's why I'm trying to establish a ground rule that anything that comes near hurting kids or teachers, for me, is sacrosanct. And if someone else wants to take responsibility for arbitrarily making those decisions, because we're the only ones who know the budget, then that's their problem. But our job is to make the best case we can
100%.
On educational grounds. And so I don't know how we can, I can't figure out a way in which we can come in much better than 1%. Even that is going to be tough, even though there's almost 2% here of items, but that's just to prove how desperate we are, not that we recommend it. So if we can agree, we're going to go back and talk about this. Can we agree that unless we find a lot of money, I don't know how we can cut below 1%.
Well, and I also, Amy, you, in your comment before, I think you said something that I just want to kind of repeat because I think it's so important. Even though there was an attempt in bringing this forward to kind of spread out potential considerations across several budget lines, they're not made in a vacuum, right? I mean, a school system and budget lines within our budget and what they represent are in so many ways interactive,
Yes.
if not interdependent. And you know, for me, that's a really important consideration here too. Because I look at this and don't think like, oh, one from here and one from there. I mean, these positions have impacts beyond that budget line. And so for me, it's really, I need to spend some time kind of thinking carefully because, as Dick is saying, I feel a real responsibility to, as a board member, to look at this in a careful way financially, but really important to think of this in a very careful way as people who are committed and engaged in the work of supporting a school system to which we feel strongly and understand that anything that we do could potentially have a negative impact on this endeavor we call excellence in education at Guilford Public Schools.
I know this is going to be, again, unpopular, but I just want to explain a little more why I'm coming through that way. And I appreciate all the explanations about, instructional coaches, interventionists, but we're sitting here tonight talking about cutting every other FTE that lives in our buildings, but not touching them. And if I was a teacher in the district, I think I'd feel like I was a second-class citizen, that you could talk about all these other FTEs and especially the teachers and cut 8 of us, but not even talk about touching a coach or an interventionist, I think is unfair to the teachers. And that's kind of where I'm coming from when I'm talking about spreading it out. It's not that I'm trying to diminish any of the models or the teaching. I think if I was a teacher, I'd feel like a second-class citizen. I truly do. And so that's why I'm just asking for it to be in consideration, because we ultimately are all here to support our teachers and our kids and make this a really great district. Part of that is making sure that people feel heard, seen, and appreciated. So that's where I'm coming from.
The alternative to that is, if teachers are truly being helped through the coaching model, and therefore carrying less burden, both psychological as well as physical, that's important, and it's hard to put a price on that. But the fact is, if that's the case, then it's actually.
But we don't have evidence that we don't have anything.
We have lots of evidence. Okay, first of all, we have all the national evidence. There's just we have as much evidence about this kind of model in supporting teachers and gaining and learning as we do about cell phone damage. Okay, so we do have that. Okay, we don't have as much data as we would like locally to show that because we have coaches, we have made these specific gains in these scores yet, because in some sense we haven't had a full coaching model for a long enough time. At some point, I would like to think we get that. I just don't want to let it sit out there. Coaches are a powerful, slightly less visible impact on learning if they're impacting teaching. Teachers get relatively minor amount of pre-service training as teachers. Okay, very relatively. They get less professional hours in teaching than people need for a license to be a hairdresser by law. Okay. To the degree that the increase of demand on teachers over the last 10, 15 years in terms of what students need and what we're facing, to not figure out ways of supporting teachers, aside from salary increases and so on, is, I think, really, short-sighted. Now, if you say you don't believe in the coaching model, that's a legitimate kind of conversation.
Right.
But I really do think the coaching model has been shown most places as powerful. This country spends a fortune on in-service education on teachers, most of which, is wasted. And so I'm glad we're not sitting here trying to justify X hundreds of thousands of dollars of regular in-service teaching.
Right.
Yeah. Just
All right.
bring in another perspective.
No,
I think it's
We're
been
all
a
here to
really
have a
good conversation
conversation.
tonight, right? And again, there are lots of things on here that I think we had a really productive conversation tonight. And I think everybody needs time to, as you said, digest this conversation before decisions start getting made.
that's right.
Yeah.
So I am going to say to the viewing public, one, first of all, thank you either for joining us or watching this after the meeting has happened. We appreciate your engagement. If anyone continues to have questions or comments they want to share, they should feel free to reach out to the board. Our email addresses are all on the Guilford Public Schools website. We will next be meeting as a board next Monday, February 9th at 7:30 here in the Guilford High School Media Center. This will be a regular meeting, so this budget discussion will happen within the agenda of that regular meeting. Anything else that I'm missing? All right. Thank you, everyone, for the really thoughtful way you're each going about this. I am going to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? Thanks. All in favor? Aye. Aye. All right. Thank you. Thank you and good night.